I have to overcome my natural shyness in front of you.
Alright, so as Thomas was saying, we're going to get started.
I look really good. I'm glad I got to see me. I'm going to get distracted. Sorry,
No worries. So I was going to start someplace kind of easy. Feminism, if that's okay. You're a big critic of third wave feminism. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what you see third wave feminism as.
Sure. Well, we should be enormously proud and enormously happy, and everyone in this room will benefit from the advances that feminism made over many decades. Lots of hard work done by mainly women, some men. Giving women a vote, giving women equal access to institutions, to academia, to the workplace, to equal pay, which they do have, and to all the other things that modern Western liberal capitalist democracy has to offer. It's the best system yet devised by man for human flourishing and happiness. It's the system that is best to deal with inequalities, and it's the system that gives everybody the best chance in life, the best start. It's also the system, if you look around the world, that treats women and minorities the best. As a woman in America, you are living in a society that treats women better than women have ever been treated in the history of our species. And in fact, women, white middle-class women in America are probably the most privileged group ever to have existed since there have been human beings. But feminism seems to be fighting the battles of yesterday, and it seems to have, I don't know, they just haven't caught up with the fact that they won. They won, and they should be celebrating. But after you win, after you celebrate, you go home. You go home, you rap out a few lines, you get a few hookers in, and you enjoy yourself, But feminists didn't do that. They were like, okay, so what can we do now? Because, yeah, that's fine, that's great, but how can we hurt men a bit more? Because I feel like they deserve it, And it's not for me to suggest that women are naturally vindictive, but if you look at the history of feminism, stop it. I meant it nicely. If you look at the history of feminism, you discover that there's always been this strain of misandry, of man-hating. There's always been a bit of feminism that seemed to care more about getting at men than fighting for women's equality. That seems to me the only bit of feminism that's left. Seems to me that feminism has become colonized by a sort of lesbianic, misandrous, horror show of quivering, fat, blue head, facial piercing, social justice warrior, lunatics. I mean that with love. These chairs are rocking backwards and forwards. You must think I'm like one of those crazy kids. It's just a lot of fun. I'm like perpetually 7 years old. I'm going to come and say hello to people. Hello sir, how are you? I think he's live streaming me, that was a mistake. It seems to me that's the only bit of feminism that's really left. And the problem with it is twofold. One, that it has left the realm of reason behind. And it has become about grievance and victimhood and feelings, ignoring facts, reason, logic, evidence, data, and argument. And that's a bad thing for anybody who cares about the latter group of things. I belong to that class of person. But the second is an assault on a more fundamental freedom. It's the freedom on which this country was built, and it's why I'm here, because we don't have it in Europe, and I like it. And it is freedom of speech. And freedom of intellectual inquiry, freedom of thought, freedom of creative endeavor, the freedom to do, be, say, think, whatever you want, the freedom to be who you like, the freedom to speak how you please, the freedom to talk to whoever you want and do whatever you want. Well, you have that too, thanks to modern capitalist liberal Western democracy. You don't have it in the least. Do whatever you want. Feminism today seeks to take away some of those rights. It seeks to police art before it even reaches us by telling the creators that certain things are problematic, or that there's some sort of microaggressions, which is this invention of the left. I'll tell you, I'm going to wrap up, I promise, but the left has a problem, and Douglas Murray, who's a British journalist, talks about this very intelligently and very brilliantly. The left has a problem with bigotry. There isn't enough of it to go around. People aren't racist anymore, people aren't sexist anymore, people aren't homophobic anymore, people don't even know what transphobic means. So the left has to do two things, right? It has to enlarge the definitions of those things, and this is where we get feminist microaggressions. where you're not being sexist, and you're not even not being sexist and not, you're just exhibiting characteristics that subtly undermine. It's ridiculous invention, it is fantasy, it is lunacy, the ever more hysterical pursuit of ever slighter perceived infractions. Well, this is a sign of a movement that won and doesn't realise that it won, or that won and just wants to keep fighting anyway, because it's now achieved such an unassailable position in culture, they can get away with murder. And if you look at the sorts of people who propagate third-wave feminism and who spread the ideas of third-wave feminism in the world today, and you look at the sorts of things they say, they are indisputably sexist, bigoted, and hateful. And the more people who realise that, feminism, whilst undeniably having a wonderful, proud history that we should all be happy about, has run its course. It's time for feminism to shut up shop and go home.
Well, speaking a little bit about safe spaces and trigger warnings, we're moving on to the Second Amendment. How would you feel about guns on campus? Currently, right now, across a majority of colleges, students are not allowed to conceal carry, have a weapon, defend themselves. They're forced to rely on campus PD or local police officers in the event of an issue. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm a very firm believer in the Second Amendment, and I think the more guns, the better in general. Here's the thing. If you were to design the perfect society, there's lots of things you wouldn't come up with. The monarchy in Britain is one of them. If you were trying to design the perfect society from scratch, you might not come up with a monarchy. But guess what? It works better than anything else. It works great, and it's done a really good job. Now, if you were to design a perfect society, you might consider not giving the population guns. Now, I don't agree with that. I believe that the Second Amendment is a necessary protection in place to preserve the First. But if you did believe that, that's a perfectly respectable point of view. But progressives don't take that respectable point of view and, the problem is they don't appreciate the world as it really is. They don't understand that the majority of gun crime, would not be stopped by any of the legislation they want. They don't seem to acknowledge that the horrific acts of murder and even of terrorism in this country now happen in gun-free zones. Why? Because people know they'll get away with it because there are no weapons. I want to protect people, and I want to allow people to protect themselves. I think every teacher should have a gun in their drawer. I think every lecturer should have a gun behind the podium. I think every student should be every student should have the right to conceal carry if they please, subject obviously to, wacko tests. Because if somebody was to run in this room now, well, don't worry, they won't, because feminists can barely tie their own shoelaces, let alone load a chamber. The most thing they've had in their hands in a long, no. But the barrel will trigger them. Maybe they get distracted. Who can say? If some mad, psychotic Islamist lunatic were to wander into the room and, I were telling a witty and charming aperçu about my sex life, and suddenly you heard, oh, by the way, did you hear? There's a big scandal in England at the moment because the police used Allah Akbar in a terrorism simulator. For the police, were sort of in simulations, like training simulations, the terrorists said Allah Akbar. And there's now it's a huge scandal because it's really offensive. It's very offensive to Muslims. What was he supposed to say? The Lord's fucking prayer? No, I don't know any terrorists that say that. Of course, one day later, there's a story in the press about 4 people who got killed, and the only thing they know about the gunman is he cried Allah Akbar. Anyway, I'm wandering off topic. But if this did happen, somebody should run in here. I want everybody in the room to be able to turn around and go, rather than a room of 300, 400, however many wonderful people are in here, thanks for coming. Wonderful people are in here, be unable to protect themselves from some marauding lunatic who wants to mow people down. Gun-free zones are like putting targets on people's backs, saying, oi, lunatic, massacre people here. I don't want them. I don't want them in public universities. I don't really want them in private universities. People should be allowed to have guns wherever and whenever they want, and they should be allowed to protect themselves or protect their families. And to suggest otherwise is to deny basic reality. Everything that liberals suggest after each new gun atrocity that happens would do nothing to stop it happening again. It's insane, and the Second Amendment should, is the second most important freedom that you have in this country, but it is a very close second, and it's mystifying to me. Well, it's not mystifying actually, because it's just universities are staffed by lib-wristed, pacifistic, tofu-eating, sandal-wearing weirdos. I mean, your professors are cunts on the whole. They're just, they have no grasp of reality whatsoever. Most of them have never even held a gun. They just think it's something people do on TV. Well, it isn't, Sometimes people like to shoot, and not because they're evil, weird, terrible people who want to murder, because it's fun. It's fun. And other people want guns because they want to protect themselves and protect their families. The fact is, the number of guns that are in circulation in the US means that the only way to protect yourself is to arm everyone.
Well, thank you.
On which subject, if anybody can tell me where I can get one of those pink Glocks, could you come up afterwards? Because I haven't worked out the law yet, like whether I here, not being a resident, am allowed to carry at all. But I'd quite like to have like a pink Glock, to protect myself from the feminists. From the feminists. Maybe Guy Monte, and it will just say like the lesbian destroyer or something. The dick crusher. Alright, I'm done.
I guess, speaking of Islam and mass immigration, terrorist attacks, there's a lot of debate going on in Europe about immigration from the Middle East and this mass kind of exodus and some of the issues coming along with it. So maybe you could elaborate, I guess, your viewpoint a little bit more.
Yes, well, I try to form my opinions delicately and express them with tact. As you know. But I don't really want any Muslims in the country. And let me... Hold up, hang on. You have two kinds of Muslims in this country. You have nice, middle-class, well-adjusted, integrated people who you were friends with in class, who are perfectly normal people who are never going to strap explosives to themselves and blow themselves up on a plane or in a public space. And when you find yourself getting angry at people generalizing about Islam and Muslims, then what do you think of? You think, oh, that's my friend, very perfectly fine. Abdul's perfectly fine. They don't do these things. That's disgusting. That's offensive. That's ridiculous. The other group of people you have in this country are terrorists. What you don't have really in this country is large numbers of working class Muslims, because it costs a lot of money to get here. You don't border any Muslim countries. You need an intercontinental plane ticket to get here. That limits the number of people who show up. So you have nice, assimilated, wealthy, middle and upper class Muslims who are perfectly harmless, nice people, by and large because they don't really practice their faith very closely. They are, they're Muslims in the sense that I'm Catholic. Fill in the gaps yourself. And then of course you have people who come here to commit terrible crimes. Now, what you'll hear even from conservative commentators, and in fact particularly from conservative commentators, they're anxious to avoid the charge of Islamophobia, which by the way doesn't exist, it's ridiculous, is that Islam is not a race, it's not a thing, it's a set of ideas, and if you interrogate those ideas and find them wanting, you're entitled to do so. What commentators will sometimes say, well no, I know it's not all Muslims, I know it's not all Muslims, but consider a few things. 52% of British Muslims, I'm not talking about Muslims in Syria, I'm not talking about Muslims in Iraq, I'm not talking about Muslims in even in Egypt, in Britain, think that homosexual sex should be against the law. This is a direct assault on who and what I am. And this is people that live in the street next to me. They believe that my sexuality should be against the law. Progressives have nothing to say about that. 39% of British Muslims believe that a woman should always obey her husband. Feminists have nothing to say about that. 25% of British Muslims believe that Sharia law should be enacted in the countries in which they live, which under certain circumstances renders a woman's opinion half or even less of that of a man's. Feminists, likewise, have nothing to say about that. It isn't ISIS or terrorists that want to throw me off a roof, or at least not just them. It is 11 or 12, as some of you will know if you've seen my videos, I always bang on at this point, but it's 11 or 12 Islamic countries, mainstream Muslim society, in which I would be killed for being me. Now, this country is the greatest country in the world. America is still the best country in the world, and if you can choose... If you can choose who to have here, why would you choose them?
So kind of switching gears a little bit, you speak a lot about the regressive left, and you've come up with a grant to kind of combat that. Could you explain a little bit the Yiannopoulos privilege grant and kind of its end goal?
Yes. Well, I always knew growing up that I would one day start a scholarship fund for poor boys. Sort of like an almshouse in the Victorian period. I always presumed it would be for young black boys, but then it was pointed out to me by my lawyer that it was just a lawsuit waiting to happen. So I decided instead to go back and look at the data, and what the data said was that actually in both Britain and America, one of the most underprivileged groups of all is poor white boys. They are educationally hugely challenged, and there are there are very few resources available for them because nobody really wants to know. There is an assault in this country on the straight white male, and in particular on the poor straight white male, because of course progressivism as practiced by Gawker and Mike and BuzzFeed and Vox and all these fucking awful places is a sort of class war waged by, largely waged by middle class women and, you know, cucks. Am I allowed to say that? Right. Male feminists, I mean, can you even imagine it? God. I mean, like, I know it's like castrate them, but they've already done it to themselves. They're awful. Anyway, it's a sort of brain disease. These awful, terrible, like diseased, damaged people lecturing and hectoring the working classes on, you know, their gauche taste in video games, or their, you know, problematic taste in movies, or their terrible habits, you know. It's a sort of class war waged by the middle and upper classes on the working classes. And the white working class in this country is rightly had enough of it, and they are just partly responsible for the rise of Donald Trump. Okay? I know not everybody, particularly people in student government and in YAL, YAF and college Republicans have to at least pretend not to like him. But, you know, I don't expect any nodding from the front row, it's fine. But, you know, these people have been lied to and lied about for now coming up for 2 generations. And they're sick of it. And what I decided to do is, well, I sort of live my life according to the maxim that nobody can resist the truth wrapped in a good joke. And I have the most fun ever when I'm doing good, but also winding up the worst people in the world. So I thought, well, what can I do that's going to really annoy people, but I can't really criticise them? It's like, it's a scholarship fund, and if you like criticise a scholarship fund, you're always going to look like a cunt. So I came up. Well, I mean, somebody else out there interested, but I decided to do it. So the Yiannopoulos privilege grant is a scholarship fund for white men who, it's both means and ability tested, so you have to be smart and you need to need the money. We've raised $250,000 from me and rich friends and some private donors who are very kind to throw some money into that. We're going to be giving out 100 grants of $2,500, which doesn't sound like a huge amount by American scholarship standards, but very often for poor families who aren't necessarily going to Harvard, they're going to college somewhere. A couple of $1,000s can make the difference between going and not going. And also for some it will be part of the package of scholarships. Hopefully it will help, and it will also, tantalizingly, create an entire generation of Yiannopoulos scholars who will go out into the world, triggering their way through life, terrorizing feminists and the progressive left. You might say if you want to that the whole thing's a bit of a stunt, but you can't really argue with sending people to college who wouldn't otherwise have been able to go. It was very interesting to me to see the reaction of the progressive left when I launched this, which was just bile and hatefulness and sarcasm. Because these people have never done anything good for themselves in their lives. They think that tweeting is the equivalent of real-world action. I say to those people, until you have stuck your neck out, put your hand in your back pocket, and organised and done something yourself for a group that you care about, rather than just sitting on the internet calling people misogynists, go fuck yourself.
And just really quick, for anyone in the audience who's interested, how can they apply?
Oh, so if you, it's privilegedgrant.com and @privilegedgrant on Twitter. Don't hold your breath for that to be verified anytime soon. Just @privilegedgrant. And we're going to be, so we closed the fund now, and now I'm in the business of like setting up all the blah blah blah. So if you just follow those, you'll get an announcement very soon about applications opening, and we hope to give the first tranche of grants for the next academic year. So September.
Thank you. So I think just one more, and then we'll probably open it up to an open Q&A.
I'm mesmerized by these screens.
Yeah, so something kind of sensitive, and we're just wrapping up on campus Sexual Assault Awareness Week. So I was wondering if you're kind of an outspoken critic on rape culture. I was wondering if you dive a little bit more into that and possibly some of the issues that can come from overemphasizing a serious issue, but possibly taking it to an extreme, which could have other consequences.
Yeah, well, saying you're a critic of rape culture is like saying you're a critic of the tooth fairy. It's meaningless because they don't exist. There is rape on campuses, but there is no rape culture. It is not endemic. There is no epidemic of rape. As Christina Armstrong and I endlessly like to say, if the statistics that these activists say were remotely true, they would be suggesting that American college campuses have rape rates approaching that of the Congo, where rape is used as a weapon of war. It's just not remotely plausible. It's obviously insane. I don't understand why we're lying to young girls, scaring them for no reason. I don't understand why we are pathologizing young boys, giving them hang-ups and insecurities and God knows what else, and driving the sexes. There are some social, consequences of driving the sexes apart, telling all young men they're all potential rapists. Well, they're not. It's just not true. And the real danger here is what Camille Pellier said in the 90s, which was you're setting these women up to be raped by scaring them about college. Why? Because they are encouraged to believe, again, with the left's widening definitions of everything, they're encouraged to believe that me sort of touching your leg, which I will do now only to demonstrate my point, and not through any sexual interest whatsoever.
I'll give you consent, that's alright.
Oh, no, I didn't want consent. Is there anything worse than consent? No. Hang on. Let me clarify. No, do you know what? There's this awful, twinkie gay pop star in Britain who's always like, oh, I can't go on the internet because there's just so many death and rape threats. I'm like, what gay man is upset about a rape threat? It's just weird. Very strange. But I'll be serious for a second. Projecting my own tastes onto the debate. I will be serious for a second. I won't touch it, okay. Look, the best sex is transgressive and dangerous, and the essence of male sexuality is dangerous and edgy, and it's what women like about us. And to sort of stamp that out and to try to make all this affirmative consent, which seems to me, the inevitable consequence of which seems to be to sign a form between thrusts. Not only is it insane and demeaning to men and offensive and based on nothing, but it also just threatens to completely destroy all of the things that are best about sex. It's mad, and here's the really important thing. It doesn't help women. One, it puts them in danger because they're encouraged to believe that tiny little leg touches or whatever constitutes sexual assault. They think that's the worst in life they're ever going to have to deal with. Some awkward boy kind of drunkenly fumbling, around in the back of a club. Get the fuck over it. My mom's generation would have just turned around and said, keep your hands to yourself, go fuck yourself, and that would have been the end of it. And that would have been a normal human interaction at college where everybody is learning about each other and about themselves, coming to terms with their sexuality, coming to terms with what it means to have a sexual attraction to another person, and sometimes messily, sometimes confusedly, working their way through that. That's perfectly normal, healthy behaviour. But when women think that's the worst they're going to have to deal with, and then they get out to the real world, and feminism is told you can dress halo, funny, and your self-esteem is not in relation to what a man thinks of you, and you can wear a short skirt and nipple tassels, and nobody has the right to look at you. I've never tried that, but I would look good in nipple tassels. I've never done drag, but I'm thinking of doing drag. My bosses are going to be really mad with me for this, but I'm going to let you know a secret. So West Hollywood, the mayor of West Hollywood has said that Donald Trump is not welcome. Facts. Oh. Other gays are terrible. I tell you what the worst thing about being gay is other gays. They're awful. I mean, I really, really like dick, but it's so hard. It's so hard because other gays are just such fucking fags. Anyway, I don't know if the mayor is gay, but he's certainly a faggot. And Donald Trump's not welcome in West Hollywood, so I want to do like a Trump rally. Like down Santa Monica or something, culminating in a petition delivered to the mayor's residence saying, we want Donald Trump, queers for Trump, trannies for Trump. There's probably no lesbians for Trump because they don't know how to laugh. And if you're in the room and you're offended by that, you're proving my point for me. I can see it. How dare you say you've got no sense of humor? Anyway, it's like atheists about this as well. Have you ever tried to argue with an atheist? There's probably some atheists in the room. To be honest with you, most of my friends are atheists, right? Because they're all disaffected liberals. They're all left-wingers. They're not nice conservative boys like you. They're all disaffected left-wingers. They're all gamers and all the rest of it. And they're like, shit, my side is nuts. I've got to team up with this crazy fucking British conservative homosexual who's the only one that's speaking any sense whatsoever with the world gone mad. But it's weird. You talk to several of these groups. Atheists are the worst. They're the most thin-skinned people in the world. So I did an interview with Dave Rubin, who's great, and I said, I don't really have any strong views on atheism except it's really fun to wind them up because they're so thin-skinned. And the first comment underneath the video was, how dare you say we're thin-skinned? and the comments on Reddit were, of course, even better. It goes atheists, basically the worst groups of people in the world. Atheists, vapors, just have a fucking cigarette! It's not that bad! Cyclists. Lesbian. What? Just what?
Just describe Cap of Eugene.
I noticed. These are the only sane people in Eugene in this room. What you've done, unwittingly, is create a sort of cyclist dystopia outside. All your fantastic, gigantic, gas-guzzling automobiles are all in a car park. But the rest of Eugene is just cyclists vaping. Just thinking about getting women into these horrendous, quivering masses of horror model themselves on Lena Dunham, thinking about going home and not fucking their girlfriends. So yeah, lesbians, and Hillary supporters. You're in the audience and you come, if you're maybe if you're a left-wing Catholic and you've come here as your yearly penitence, you've just come to torture yourself, well, that's okay, I can fuck with you. Like, I can fuck with Bernie supporters. Bernie supporters are alright. They're like Trump supporters, they just want to see the world burn. And I can get behind that, they just want to tear everything down and start again because it's all fucking shit. Right? I can appreciate that, but Hillary supporters just have most of their brain missing. Just most of the brain is missing. They're thinking, who should we vote for president? I know, this woman whose entire family is basically like a generational criminal enterprise. The most unlikable, unsympathetic and repugnant woman ever to walk the face of the earth. This is our representative internationally. Oh, thank you. Anyway, I've lost track of the question.
I think you did. I think you answered it pretty well. And I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up this part and then maybe open it up to some questions from the audience. If people would like to start forming a line behind Lauren there and kind of wrap it up the stairs and around.
All right. We're gonna try and get through. I have a habit, you may not have noticed this, and if you have noticed, you're probably too polite to bring it up, but I have a habit of giving very long answers to very short questions. I'm going to try to get better at that, so I can get through as many of these as possible. So, hello sir. Would you like to start?
So, I think this will be the first question, but I know officially, and you did say tonight, you're joking when you say feminism is cancer.
No. What gave you that impression? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you guys see this thing at American University? Did anyone watch that video? Where the woman came up, she's like, so you know, like, you're really great, and I really like you, and really interesting and provocative. And I was like, okay, there's a bot coming. And like, but like, I'm a feminist, and I'm also a cancer survivor, and I'm like, what would you say to my parents? And I just feel like, oh, you know, this fucking girl, this bitch. It's like, no, you're just trying to weaponize her own illness, fuck you. What I said to her was, to quote my favorite rapper, if you can take a dick, you can take a joke, sit down. I'm sorry, carry on. No, I'm not joking, I mean it. It is, well maybe it's AIDS. No, cancer is good. Carry on.
I've had 2 friends die of cancer. Yes,
That sounded really sincere. Fuck you guys.
and when they died, I thank God that they didn't have feminism. So my question
I think you set the tone nicely. You know that the reason those fuckers took my verification badge, and they said it wasn't this, but I know that it was. I did that poll, and I said, would you rather your kids have A, feminism, or B, cancer? And cancer won 55 to 45. After 22,000 votes. The internet decided. The people spoke. They chose cancer. And I had people texting me, and I had people tweeting me, emailing me. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I chose cancer. My mom just died of cancer, and I chose cancer. My girlfriend's just been diagnosed with leukemia. I chose cancer. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. Anyway, thank you for that. That was a nice thought. I keep interrupting.
Real question. So it came out today that people reported that Facebook was censoring conservatives, shocking nobody in this room. But it seems like it's getting everywhere now. It's at Twitter, it's at universities, it's on TV, it's in movies. It seems to be every single spot. I have friends who, on Facebook, who won't say it to my face, I've known for years, will be willing to just say, you're racist for thinking this, sexist, homophobic, bigoted, transphobic. What do you think? We can't all be as shocking as you. What do you think for us normal
people who have
to live normal lives who, if this
I am very
unavoidable for what I just said about
I'm sorry, are we keeping you from something? Are we keeping you from something? You showed up early in such a nice shirt and a very sound stand-up. Come on, give him a round of humiliation applause. We're keeping you from the new season of, I don't know, what would you watch? What do you think he watches? Parks and Recreation?
Yes, Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black. Do you like that? No, what do you watch on Netflix? What's your favourite Netflix show? It's that thing with the elderly, with the women and the gay husband. What's it called? Gracie. Gracie, he knew. I hadn't even finished the sentence and he knew. Alright, we're done, we're fine. You're still trying to finish. I think I got it, and my answer is this. You can't all be dangerous faggots. I mean, It's hard on the knees. But I'd like to think that little acts of defiance, like 100 little acts of defiance a day, will help to erode the oppressive hegemony of social justice. So I would like to, you can't be me, but you can take a little bit of me with you. I think the best response to some of this stuff, because it is so patently ridiculous, is simply to laugh. And I think if you go through life joyfully, and with good humour, and laughing at things that are funny, like expecting us to believe that cutting your cough off makes you a woman. That's funny. No, don't be hiss. But I heard that. Okay, look, it's ridiculous. Does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe that Caitlyn Jenner is a woman? No, but we're all forced to say it. We're forced to say it on pain of being exorcised, of being expelled from polite society, of losing our jobs, of losing, of losing our ability to express our opinion on other subjects. We are forced by the progressive left to lie and adopt political positions we don't hold about medical issues we don't care about, just to prove that we're not bigots. Well, fuck them. It's funny. He left very quickly, when my answer took a dark turn.
Alright, Cutie, you can pick which one to answer. These are two hot tickets. Okay, so if gender is a social construct, how the fuck can transgender people exist? Or, what the fuck is cultural appropriation?
Oh, well, I'll answer both briefly. Cultural appropriation is a lie the left tells to try to control people's behaviour, to try to suggest that we're all racists. Well, there's another word for cultural appropriation, another term for it, how art works. Famous cultural appropriations in history include Mozart, Picasso, Wagner, Lil Wayne. Cultural appropriation is how art works, remixing, reimagining, and reinterpreting influences from the past. That's not racism, that's the opposite of racism. That is respect, that is paying homage to other cultures and histories and influences, and taking the best of them and reinterpreting them according to your own tastes. That's the opposite of racism. Cultural appropriation is a ludicrous concept. And as a result of that, some of you will know what I'm planning at Yale, but for the benefit of you who don't, you remember that viral video of the girl screaming at her professor because his wife had had the temerity to say, yes. To say, you know what, mariachi costume is not that big a deal. And she didn't even say that, she was much more cautious than that. So Yale is probably the craziest campus in America. And they're very worried, the campus authorities are very worried about what's going to happen at Halloween. Because they're aware that tempers are running high, everyone's very sensitive, upset social justice warriors. So with my customary tact and delicacy, I will be delivering a lecture in full Native American costume. and the lecture will be called Famous Cultural Appropriations in History, and it will include, as I said earlier, Picasso, Mozart, Beethoven, Wagner, Milo Yiannopoulos. I will explain how cultural appropriation is really a sort of wacky modern invention that flies in the face of hundreds of years of art criticism and all good sense and good taste. And by the way, if you really care that much, fuck off away from this campus because you are treading on the dead bodies of Native Americans. You don't care. It is just an excuse for you to have a crack at another white man. Go fuck yourself. Your first question, what was that? Sorry, it's the
Okay, so if gender is a social construct,
oh, yeah. No, there's no answer to that because it's bullshit, because gender isn't a social construct. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say that all gender is a performance and is a construct. But some people are born with female brains. It's obviously bollocks, you have to pick one, and the one you pick is the one that science suggests, which is that gender is innate. But there's a biological basis for the vast majority of male and female behaviors, and though of course, pink and blue, there may be no necessary connection between sex, gender, and particular colours. There certainly is between hormonal levels, competitiveness, empathy, communication, the will to whatever. There are all sorts of things that map very closely onto specific genders. Genderqueer weirdo outliers, the lunatics, have taken over the asylum and they're running life for the rest of us. And I think it's time they stopped. a fucked up, reasonable, Jesus.
They're logical arguments, but what you do is when somebody calls you a racist or a bigot or a misogynist or whatever, is you know that you can't respond reasonably because those aren't reasonable attacks. They're attacks on your character. So you make rhetorical responses. You say, oh, you're fat, you're ugly. You do something that is a true trait about them, but you know because it's not about reason. And I'm wondering if you would just elaborate on how you understand, how you rhetoric in that sense. And
yeah, I mean, I think you can interrogate reason and evidence with reason and with critical faculties, but what you can't do is you can't deconstruct feelings-based prejudice and hatred with reason. You can only really fight fire with fire. And this is why I say the only appropriate response to outrage culture is to be outrageous. If somebody is going to abandon reason and as a way of getting at you, call you a racist, scream at you that you're sexist, a bigot, a transphobe, a homophobe, God knows what else, there really only is one appropriate response, and that's ridicule and laughter. It is the only thing these people understand, and it's the one thing that annoys them more than anything else. I like, what my friend Jason Quantin, the editor at MIT Tech Review, says. There's one thing that dictators and authoritarians have hated throughout history, and it is the sound of laughter. They hate it. The people who want to control what you can say, think, read, do, how you can speak, who you can hang out with, how you can dress, the one thing they hate more than anything else is joyfulness. They hate mirth, they hate laughter, they hate happiness because they're not happy. And the best response is a healthy sense of ridicule and amusement, and if they are going to debase themselves and humiliate themselves by throwing out wild allegations and accusations, I have absolutely no compunction whatsoever in responding in just as ludicrous a fashion by laughing at them for things they can check about themselves. They are coming to me in court, making attacks on my character that are not true. Well, I'm perfectly entitled to make attacks on their life choices as well, and their life choices involve getting fat and disgusting.
I just want to say, it's really weird listening to you without having someone interrupt every 5 minutes.
I've been doing interrupting today, I'm trying to make up for it.
So anyway, throughout the primary process, I was a pretty big Trump skeptic, but I'm trying really hard to be a team player. I bought the hat, I went to the rally, just because I can't stand Hillary and need to stop her. If you get your dream job of being Trump's press secretary, what would you tell them to do to stir up, people like me, more traditional conservatives who want to vote for him but just aren't quite there yet? And I thought you're one of the people who makes the best case for Trump. So I just want to, right on the edge, I want to, what's the case?
Well, a couple of things. One is that the Republican Party is no longer fit for purpose and deserves to be torn up, burnt to the ground and rebuilt. There's a very fast route to accomplishing that, and that is President Trump. The second thing is that the white working class in this country have been ridiculed, demeaned, lied about, lied to, and disenfranchised for generations, and they deserve restitution from that. The only way to do that is President Trump. The third thing is, we live in a society in the West now where telling the truth has become difficult. It's even become dangerous. It's become socially disadvantageous and professionally perilous. Just saying facts, like there's no gender pay gap, because there obviously fucking isn't. And there's no culture on campus. And maybe Black Lives Matter, whose only real result is black cities in flames, isn't the best way to help black people. For these things, you can lose your newspaper column, you can lose all sorts of things. You can put yourself in real danger. There's an answer, I think, to the overweening political correctness and language policing that seems to have taken hold on American popular culture. Only one answer, that answer is President Trump. If you care, therefore, about protecting the culture and identity of the West, which is under very serious threat from left-wing politicians who want to import Muslims, who want to import Mexicans, who want to import all kinds of other cultures to erode what has made this country great, which is not whiteness, by the way. It's just a shared adherence to certain values, to freedom, democracy, freedom of speech, property rights. If we're going to introduce not other races, but other cultures that don't respect those values, this country is going to cease to be great. There's one answer to that, that's Donald Trump. So these are some of the reasons why you can be a conservative and, set aside all that nonsense about, Donald Trump is a liberal. American conservatism is obsessed with the free market. It treats the free market as a sort of deity. Well, the risk there is that you end up tearing down cathedrals to build shopping malls. And you end up importing cheap labor to satisfy the demands and the needs of the owners of multinational corporations at the expense of the people who live here, of their dreams and their aspirations and their chances in life. Now, Donald Trump has successfully identified that those people, those natural conservatives, those people who care about the culture, values, and institutions of the West, those people are going extinct, and nobody seems to care much about it. And he'd quite like them to stick around, because after all, it is the much maligned, Western democratic, liberal in the sense of classical liberal, straight white male, of feminist folklore that got us to the moon, that built the internet, that is responsible for most of the best things in the world. That culture is something to be celebrated and protected, and I think there's one answer to that, and that's Donald Trump. There are all sorts of reasons why somebody who is an instinctive, natural, authentic conservative should view Donald Trump as one too. What he has identified, I think correctly, and you may not agree with his prescription, but I think his diagnosis is accurate, is that the slavish adherence to free market principles so celebrated by the entire Republican establishment has not served everyone. It served the very rich, and it served immigrants. It hasn't necessarily served Americans very well.
Hi, on the off chance that you came here on a land vehicle, not the phallic, opulent private aircraft I assume that you travel with.
Devon Air Force One. I don't have that, but I will.
One day, as the president.
Press secretary.
Yeah, exactly.
Press secretary. Sorry, go on.
On the off chance that that was a land-borne vehicle that you came here on, and that it was traveling north, I wanted to ask you if you enjoyed Roseburg.
What is Roseburg?
The city about an hour south here.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't know what that is. Are you asking me because it's mostly black? I'm just guessing, because people always ask me if I've been to Detroit and Baltimore, and I Googled them later and realised why I'm being asked that. Is that the reason? No, okay.
It was the place that caught your attention a few months ago, 6 months ago or so, when there was a lunatic situation there. And
Tell me, I don't remember this.
so there was a lunatic that shot up a community college in this state, and it caught your attention, and I noticed that, and I was wondering, it kind of brought to my attention a kind of chicken or the egg question to you, to kind of clarify those intentions there. And that was, which came first? The susceptibility by people, by mostly young people, to kind of joining the bandwagon, and actually participating in the propaganda of all of this third wave and whatnot, social justice, or is it actually lunacy itself that causes that in the first place? Therefore, lunatics like these school shooters got their lunacy from some other source other than. So, what's the cause and what's the effect?
I'm not entirely sure I follow the question. Is it anybody else? Or is it me?
Not you.
It's not me. Let's try that one again. Sorry, I didn't do this disrespectful. I just didn't quite follow the question.
Does lunacy cause social justice warrior madness?
Oh,
or
I see.
does social justice warrior madness
Cause madness. Well, no, I don't think. I think social justice can provoke madness, or at least mad-seeming behaviours in people, because it can justify outrageous things. They can justify outrageous things by appeal to higher virtues. Now, you consider. I'll talk about this in terms of free speech because that's what I know best. Obviously. In the 90s, it was the religious right who were justifying censorship and religious right through many periods in history have justified some very awful things by appeal to a higher power. Now, these days it's the progressive left who say that in search of, in the pursuit of equality, diversity, and tolerance, that we can do awful things to people, and that it's somehow okay because there's a sort of cosmic justice being served. Well, when you arrive at university, you don't arrive mental, but many people do leave mental. And what we really mean by that is they have acquired a belief system that is not based on reason. They've acquired a belief system that's based on grievance and victimhood. And it's very easy to buy into those things, and it's very easy once you have abandoned fact, evidence, and logic as the primary means to interrogate the world. It's easy to start rationalizing away awful things. And so I think, without getting too Alex Jones on you.
Did you speak up?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think they can't hear you in the back. Oh.
Without getting too Alex Jones on you, we...
There one spray chemtrails.
Yeah. We only have the filters on board. We have the filters on board, and I've got those great, like the man pills. They're great. You're an Alex Jones fan, aren't you?
1776 will commence again.
I think you've got the hair for it. No, I mean, we live in a late decadent period in our culture's history. We live in a period where we have ceased to look out into the world and we've started to look in on ourselves and to punish and to attack each other. And social justice is a symptom of that. The rising powers in the world, China and Russia, look outward into the world. They look how they can spread their influence, what they can conquer, what they can achieve, what they can accomplish. America is seeking to withdraw to withdraw itself and to turn in on itself. Russia is annexing Crimea. America is occupying itself in transgender pronouns. That's not too much of an exaggeration. We live in this sort of late decadent period where it's difficult to be optimistic about this stuff. Basically, you're all fucked. Because your generation is going to just about be okay. After that, sort of the madness is going to become endemic. Kim Peller again writes about this stuff. She says that late periods, whether it's Mesopotamia or Egypt or the Greeks or the Romans, they always start getting obsessed with transgenderism. It's true. It's one of those little signs that you've got nothing left to talk about. You've got nothing left to fight for and nothing interesting left to do. And the relationship between the sexes has become so dysfunctional that gender roles have broken down, that you don't need an army anymore, or you've just consigned the army to the working classes, that people's priorities, that the aspirations of civilization have sort of broken down. I think that's happened in America, and I think that's a sort of systemic madness which has made social justice possible. And social justice, of course, has a feedback, reinforcing feedback loop effect. Not only are people susceptible to madness, but they now believe mad things too. And I don't see very much hope of arresting that, though it would be nice if we had a president who didn't mind the masculine virtues and didn't seek to demonize them as toxic. It would be nice if we had a president who was quite pleased with being a man, and I think Trump is, and that's one of the reasons I quite like him as president.
How basically the best way to combat third-wave feminism is to just slap in their face, but I find a lot of times it's ineffective at most, and...
The slapping. I meant it metaphorically. You shouldn't go around slapping feminists. They might take it as proving their point.
I was just wondering, if there's any, other way more effective ways to essentially, basically put Europe back on the right track, because I'm a very proud European, and I hate to see the place, go to, essentially being enveloped by political correctness and its own lunacy.
Yeah, I think that public shaming gets a bad reputation. I think public shaming is very important. It's a very useful tool in the arsenal. Well, the left's used it for 30 years. Well, maybe it's our turn, a little bit. And as a journalist, my job is public shaming, and that's what we do for a living. I think the best way to fight this stuff is to hold these people up in the full glare of the sun. Because when you shine a spotlight on their craziness, most reasonable people realize that actually they don't have very much interesting to say, and by and large they are incredibly broken, damaged, hateful, horrible people who are unhappy and are seeking to make others unhappy to make up for it. the craziness in social justice, if there's a way to fight it that is not physical violence, which we should always resist, unless they're really fat. Kidding, just kidding. I don't want to touch it. We should always resist physical violence, except in extreme cases. Although people who say violence doesn't work have never won a fight. We should, I think, we should do to them what they have done to us for so long. Hold them up to, the full glare of the spotlight. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Allow them to hang themselves with their own words. Because let me tell you, on this tour, you've been a depressingly well-behaved audience, but on this tour, when guests are assaulted for daring to show up, because it doesn't even occur to the left that somebody might come to a talk just to hear something they don't agree with. The left don't even, they can't even imagine that might be the case. When black people are threatened with physical violence by Black Lives Matter, when feminists are, threatening to do things to me, they are intrinsically hateful and ridiculous, and they deserve to be ridiculed. They deserve to be held up, as spectacles, as examples of how not to live, as examples of how not to pursue debate in the public square, as examples of all that is bad about the authoritarian instinct. They're examples of all of the things that you should avoid if you are somebody who goes through life with intellectual humility and an open mind and wants to learn about the world, discover things, rather than have everything told to you by awful, hateful bigots. I think that Triggerly Puff. Triggerly Puff like emails. People say, oh, it's a bit cruel, isn't it? I'm like, no, fuck Triggerly Puff. She's a 20-year-old person with no self-control and no self-discipline, who instead of taking control and taking responsibility for her odious life choices, instead seeks again, like the trans lobby, to make us all lie. And make us all like, she knows that there's no such thing as body positivity. She knows that she looks disgusting, she's going to cost the health system a fortune, she's going to die young, and she's going to be alone and miserable her whole life. She knows that. But we're all forced to say, oh no, it's fine. You can be healthy at any size. Are they fucking kidding? No, they're not. But it's a lie. And something like that is intrinsically stupid and ridiculous. And the person who's really at fault is the adult. She got to college, miserable, troubled, damaged, fine, I get it. But what really makes me so mad, and I don't understand this, and I'd love to sit down with one of these people and shake them and ask them why they do this. Who is the adult who sat her down and said, that's okay, honey. You can be any size you want. I'm sorry. I'm just using you as the example. For the sake of our role play. Stop it. Behave. For the sake of our role play, you were Triggerly Puff. And I'm a normal sized person. Just stop eating! It's not hard! Just stop eating! Who is the person that told... I can't do it, I'm sorry. Who is the person that told her it's okay? That she was going to be happy? That she was going to find somebody who loved her? That she was going to be alright? She's not going to be alright! She's going to be unhappy her whole life. And it's not her fault, ultimately. It's the fault of people who told her lies. And they told, this feelings over fact horse shit. Like, you can be any size you want and it's fine. You can say whatever you want, do what you want, as long as you're not straight, white, male, or votes Republican. Be whatever you want, do what you want, and it's fine. You can be hateful and bigoted and dreadful and it's fine. And you can turn yourself into this ugly, disgusting, horrible spectacle and dare people to call you fat. Well, I will call you fat, because you are. And you can take responsibility for your life choices. And I'm so pissed at the adults who tell these vulnerable young women they can make terrible life choices and condemn these young girls to lives of misery and loneliness under the banner of social justice. Fuck those guys. Notwithstanding all that, I'm perfectly fine with ridiculing people who make spectacles of themselves in public. Like, did you see the, I don't even know if it was a tranny, if it looked like a boy it just looked like a tit in a wig, like some terrible boy in a dress, American, did you see that? That sort of awful hair and the off-the-shoulder dress. I'm like, honey, you've got shoulders like a shot putter. Don't wear them off the shoulder. Don't wear it off the shoulder, because there's nothing feminine about this. You know, he's got this sign that says, Milo wants me dead. I don't want you dead, I just want you to get a new stylist. You know? I want you to be better dressed. I want that outfit burned, not you. No, I mean, did you see, what was the, do you know what, just something amazing? Something amazing. This tells you how sick American universities are. The woman at Rutgers, so I was at, my first proper tour stop was at Rutgers. And I was talking about free speech and the importance of the integrity of the academic environment. And I was standing up and saying, you know, universities should be places where anything is possible, where you can hear any opinion, where there are no limits to what can be thought and said. And this woman stood up and said, "This man preaches hate speech," smeared herself with like red paint. Who all saw that? She's just been given a Human Dignity Award by the Dean of Rutgers. Did someone say degeneracy? I agree. I don't know if we're allowed to use that word. I mean, if there's one thing that woman isn't, it's A, human, and B, she's certainly got no dignity. You know, it's mystifying to me that these sorts of behaviours, these self-destructive behaviours, are being legitimised, are being encouraged, being enabled by colleges and universities. Like, universities now are spending resources on indulging the worst kind of social justice horseshit. Here, you have, what's it, your bias unit? You have a bias unit, is that right? Yeah. I mean, what the fuck? Oh yeah, bias, as long as it's bias in one direction, you know? Oh, I'm guessing they don't care too much about, you know, Bernie supporters. It's just so bizarre, it's so weird, you know? You can go in there, and this plays itself out on social media and everywhere. You can be the worst kind of hateful person. You can say terrible things. I bathe in male tears. Masculinity is so fragile. You know, what's the other one they say? What's the other one? I can't remember.
Fox is scum.
Maybe that. I can't remember. Anyway, you say the worst things about people as long as they belong to these supposedly privileged groups, which actually, when you look at the numbers, aren't privileged at all. This is being enabled by your colleges, and you and your parents are paying tuition fees to support this stuff, and it's disgusting, and you should resist it at every turn. You should resist it with the polite but persistent application of reason and the constant sound of laughter.
I'm a huge fan. One of my favorite comedians.
No, don't do that. That's what the left does when they don't want to. See, the left does this. The left. I know it was a compliment, and I'm grateful. But I want to make a point, which is, you know, I was talking to Anna Marie Cox, who lesbianic temperament is contained within her name. She's probably not a lesbian, but I don't know. She interviewed me for the New York Times. You will, of course, all know that I was on the talk page of the New York Times magazine this weekend because I'm you know, Beyonce, Rihanna, Milo Yiannopoulos. It's a logical way to go. She interviewed me, and the bit of the interview which strangely did not make it into the print edition was when she said, "Oh, well, you're kind of like a performance artist, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And she said, "Well, I'm trying to get you to say something new, and we've already got an Ann Coulter." I said, "Well, I don't think Ann Coulter, and I like her role. She's a political pundit. I don't know what the fuck I am, some shitlord that shows up at colleges. I talk about free speech and culture. Ann is like a nuts and bolts political pundit. We're completely different. She's very serious. I try to be funny. I don't understand." She's like, "Oh, well, these are performance artists." This is what the left does when they want to delegitimize you. They want to take their argument seriously. They'll say you're a troll. They'll say you're, a performance artist. They'll say that you're a comedian. And so I said to her, "Okay, well, what is it that you don't like about Anne?" She said, "Oh, I just don't respect her thinking." I said, "Okay. Which books have you read?" And in my head, I'm quickly thinking, right, just make sure you know the names of like 6 of them. I said, "Which books have you read?" "Oh, I've read one of them." I said, "Which one was that?" "Was it Slander, Mug?" And I rattled off all this. I was really proud of myself. I don't know where it came from, but I got all of them. I said, "Any of them ring a bell?" And she said, "Well, it was a long time ago. I don't remember." And I said, "So basically, you've seen a clip of her on YouTube, and you don't like the look of her, and you're saying you don't respect her as a thinker. How do you know you've never read anything she's written? You've never read any of her books. You have no basis on which to interrogate her as her powers of reason. You have no basis on which to pass judgment on her rhetorical skills. You have no right whatsoever to express an opinion on her at all because you haven't read any of her serious work." That didn't make it into the Q&A. But the point was, this is what the left does, so you should resist this. And I'm sorry, and I know you're giving me a compliment. I've been incredibly discourteous to you by interrupting and having a go. But yeah, but don't let people do that. Just because somebody's funny doesn't make them a comedian. Because as soon as you're a comedian, it means you have to listen to their arguments. Because they're just being funny. They're just trolling. They're a performance artist. That's what the left did for 30 years with conservatives who, like, you know, didn't look like conservatives were supposed to look, you know, like too funny, too hot, too rich, whatever. Actually, no, we're supposed to be rich, I'm all right now. Who didn't look like conservatives were supposed to look. Oh, well, you know, it's just sort of before that. Well, this enabled them to disregard the arguments, and we sort of quietly started amassing armies because nobody was taking us seriously. Well, ordinary people were taking us seriously, so the rest of the media weren't. So Anne Coulter has a huge audience, and this is, of course, what gave rise to, guess what, Donald Trump. Because people aren't taking the concerns of people very seriously. I've wandered very far from the point, and I know that none of that was remotely deserved by what you said. Please carry on.
So I have two questions.
It's the Adderall. What?
I've seen a lot. It's funny you say that. Did you say Adderall?
Yeah, no, I was kidding. I mean, I have some, but I'm not on it.
No, funny that you say that. That's what my question involves.
Oh, okay.
I've seen a lot of your videos.
Yeah.
And you touch very briefly on how 1 in 7 young American boys are on Adderall or Ritalin or like an ADHD medication. And it's not that ADHD or ADD is a real thing. It's rather a feminine view on how children should behave and how it's trying to control young men from being raucous.
That's a very good summary.
Okay. And
what's
my second question, well, I was going to ask for your thoughts on that too.
I think you've expressed them beautifully. What was the other question?
The other question was, are you familiar with Sam Harris?
Yes, and he's great, and probably a bit scared of me, because he's nice and respectable and probably goes to nice dinner parties with, you know, people who wouldn't dream of hanging out with someone like me. But I like him very much. He's cool, he's very cool.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was really awkward and horrible for you, I understand. I'll give you a hug later. Thank you. Give us a round of applause.
I had a question about another group of your favorite people, Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
I don't know why they protest me. I've done so much for the black community.
So I've seen some of your videos, and you call them, a black supremacist movement, and with, you back that up with them wanting segregated housing on campuses and stuff like that, but I couldn't really find anything else that you said about them. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Well, I've addressed it briefly when they've shown up to talk, but the reason I haven't elaborated on it is I don't talk about it that much. I don't really address race at all. I mean, I've got a few things, taking the mickey out of them now and again. I don't understand why they protest me. I don't know why. I don't know why Black Lives Matter protest me. I have absolutely no idea why they even show up. But I'm perfectly happy to tell them that if they insist on indulging in grievance culture and victimhood and blaming other people for their problems, they will amount to nothing. They will, it's the same with the feminist contingent. They want to blame men for women's problems, absent any evidence whatsoever. In fact, in defiance of all of of everything we know about the world as it currently stands. Feminists, seek to by invoking the spectre, this mysterious force called the patriarchy, seek to blame all men for the problems of all women. Well, it's ridiculous. And if you seek to do that, to absolve yourself of responsibility for your own mediocrity and laziness, well, you're not going to amount to very much when you enter the real world outside the safe, safe, closeted college environment and into the workplace where you may be paid shock horror on merit. You may be paid according to how hard you work. You may be paid according to the hours you put in. These are some of the reasons men get paid more than women in some jobs, because they work harder. When you realise that the lengths these people go to blame others for their own failings, you realise that they're going to go out to the world and make nothing of themselves. And I think much of this is behind Black Lives Matter, much of this is behind feminism too. The extent to which I criticise Black Lives Matter is I simply say this. For decades, black people have consistently voted in Democrat administrations in their cities, and the result has been a widening of the gap between the rich and the poor, the breakdown of the black family, and black cities in ruins. There's one thing that all of those cities have in common, and it is Democrat mayors and Democrat local administrators. Maybe it's time to try Republicans. There's an analogy of American college campuses too, and some of you have seen my talks will have heard this before. We're expected to believe that American college campuses are hotbeds of rape, racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Well, these are places that have been run by liberals for 30 years. Liberals are telling us that places run by liberals are hotbeds of all of this misogyny and bigotry. Well, maybe you need to mix the faculty up a bit. Maybe it's time for a change. Maybe we should start installing some conservative deans who are going to remind people of the importance of personal responsibility, in fact. Because it seems to me that there's that famous definition of madness, repeating the mistakes of the past and expecting a different outcome. Well, that's what black people are doing when they keep voting for Democrats, and that's what progressive students are doing when they, don't demand more ideological and political diversity in their colleges.
I can appreciate your approach of expanding freedom of speech and public discourse by rattling cages and social disobedience. One of my favorite musical and visual artists, Marilyn Manson, made a large cultural headway through this approach. But as an atheist, a cyclist, and a self-identified male feminist, I'm pretty sure that it comes as no surprise that I find a lot of your ideas both dangerous and hateful. It's no doubt that there are logical and cultural political extremists on both the left and the right. Sure, the so-called regressive left exists, but it's such a small societal problem, in my opinion. My two questions are, aren't there bigger fish to fry? And don't you think you could use your notoriety and charisma to affect more noble societal changes?
Well, thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the compliment. The answer to the first question is no, there aren't bigger fish to fry, because when you get out into the world and you realize that the media is controlled by not just the left, but the regressive left, the bad guys, so is the entertainment industry, so are universities, so in fact, and so increasingly is politics. You realize that actually the very worst and craziest of the left is allowed to run rampant in all the great institutions of this country, almost unopposed. And conservatives continue to concede ground to them on social issues over and over and over again. To the point where the president is repeating lies about the wage gap and lies about campus rape culture. I hope so. So you seem to be a very reasonable and polite and well-mannered, thoughtful person. I hope you don't believe in the lie of the wage gap, the lie of campus rape culture. And I don't think Obama does either, but he says it. And he says it because of the worst regressive elements that we're talking about. You can lose your job, you can lose your position as a newspaper columnist by not conforming to things that you know aren't true. I think that represents a fundamental threat to democracy. I think it represents a threat to the integrity of free speech, to the history of, to the ideas that we're allowed to discuss in the public square. The fact that men can't speak out about injustices or about problems that affect men without risk of ridicule, censure, and silencing, I think represents a very serious problem. That is a direct result of the regressive left. This nasty sociopathic tendency in the media to scoff and sneer at men. Well, there are some realities about men. 97% of workplace fatalities are male. There are all sorts of, more women go to college now, women graduate, they get higher grades. The male suicide epidemic is at its highest rate since 2001, and nobody gives a shit. And when NPR reports about it, they say, there's an increase in female suicides, as though women are the problem, when no, actually men are killing themselves at 20, 30 times the rate in some countries. Why? The regressive left. No, actually, there are no bigger fish to fry. It is the ultimate fish to fry. It is the whale that must be carved up. And carved up with the biggest knives we can find. It is not not the elephant in the room, it is the blue whale in the thimble that is poisoning American public life. No, there's nothing more serious than that. And in response to your second question, I'll just tell you what I tell everybody. I am not responsible for the entire free speech movement. My particular brand of bomb throwing, if you like, is the bit that I'm good at. But there are lots of other people. Christina Hoff Sommers, very reasonable, classy, calm feminist, who, feminist professor, one of the few good ones, who I sometimes give talks with, and I'll say something obnoxious and ridiculous and over the top, and she'll say what Milo meant to say. But, there are many different ways in which people can come to be challenged and to have their minds broadened and their ideas challenged. One of those is with provocateurs that blow open the fire doors and lob missiles. Once you've done that, once you've got people to listen, the people who bring up the rear are, in many cases much more reasonable and calm and serious than I am. But they don't get listened to without me. They don't get their foot in the door without me. They don't get airtime without me. They don't get invitations without me. You may not like my manner, you may find it coarse and crass and unnecessary. Well, you're right about two of those. It is coarse and it is crass, but it's also very necessary. Stay where you are. Stay right where you are. You said you find some of my... Actually, no, come up here. Can you have a chair? Yeah, come. You said you find some of my ideas hateful. Which? Oh, let me do that. Give us a scale. We can sing the national anthem together.
I have another song. I'm sorry.
You don't sing? You
No.
see, this is why you're the feminist. Are you giving me notes?
Yes, it's your tweet.
Oh, it's my tweet? What's my tweet? What is it? Which one?
Global warming stopped 16 years ago. Do you still believe that?
When did I tweet that?
In 2012.
2012! I've tweeted 160,000 times. Do you expect me to remember them all? Go sit down. Go sit down.
Do I get to listen?
What? No, I'm under no obligation to listen to you. I'm under your friend.
Okay. I was just going to wonder if you still believe it exists.
I don't take a huge interest in it. I think I saw the link that you pointed to was the Telegraph, which is probably the best.
It was Daily Mail, actually.
The Daily Mail, of course you hate the Daily Mail. Let's move on.
Why do you tweet that?
Which of my ideas do you
I think that's a bigger fish to fry.
You're being rude to everyone else in the room.
You didn't answer my question.
I don't take much of an interest in global warming. If you really want to know, and I'll give you the answer to this, and you should listen to this, I worked for a climate change NGO for 2 years and have far more understanding of climate change than you will ever have. I saw the lies, the graph fixing, the corruption, the disgusting practices of the parasitic organizations that circle the UN. Demanding money from foundations to prop up lies and hysteria about climate change. I'm not saying that humans have no effect on the environment whatsoever. I don't know. What I am telling you is neither do those scientists. They have no clue, and they are well aware that
97% of scientists.
If you want an answer to your question, you have to listen to it. I have seen with my own eyes, as a researcher and a speechwriter for one of the most influential climate change NGOs, just how corrupt and mendacious the climate industry is. I have absolutely no faith whatsoever in that process. I have seen the scientists whose names are on IPCC reports object to their own language being changed by bureaucrats to make it more hysterical and more alarmist. I have been in the room when it happened. That is the thing that turned me off the left forever. So if you ask me, you come out here with some sort of provocative question about climate change, intending to paint me as some kind of anti-science bigot, I will tell you, nobody fucking knows, and the last people I would ever trust are the scientists who hysterically claim that we need to stop doing all of these things, when in fact nothing we do in the West makes any difference whatsoever. It is only China and India that matter, and nothing we can do can possibly affect the environment in big enough amounts to to do anything whatsoever, and the climate is always changing. The climate has changed for, since there has been a planet. There is climate change as a truism. It's like saying people breathe oxygen. How much people are responsible for it? Not a lot.
Out of everything, climate change was the wrong one to pick, sir.
Right, let's have a few little moments together, and then we're gonna have a nice time. You see, no fucking progressive speaker would do this, I'm gonna tell you. When was the last time you saw a feminist invite a men's rights activist on stage? You will never see it. You, sir, are my men's rights activist. All right. Now, I'm gonna just have a nice chat. I'm not gonna have a go. I'm not gonna come to you. I'm gonna have a nice little discussion, and then I'm gonna say hello to everybody. We're gonna wrap up. So you said that you find some of my ideas dangerous and hateful. Can you expand on that?
I will, and I'll also preface that by saying you might shoot me apart because I'm only familiar with about that much of your material. So
it's quite a big claim to make about somebody when you're not really familiar with them.
I'm familiar enough, I think, to ask the broad question that I asked.
Right, but you called my ideas dangerous and hateful.
Yeah, because I think that, sure, I think that a lot of your material and what you choose as talking points is riddled with a lot of hypocrisy.
I can give a specific example.
So, for example, you're obviously identified as a gay male and pretty proud of it. That's great. And it seems like you lack a lot of empathy for the challenges of other LGBT community members, because it is a community that has struggled and has only recently gained a lot of the rights that many of us, myself, are privy to. And they're still not there. So the ways in which that you talk about...
Can you perhaps suggest something I've said that leads you to believe?
Yeah, so the way that you approach all feminists and refer to them as lesbianic and kind of
these vastly disproportionately lesbian. Look at the makeup of a gender studies department. Look at the makeup of a women's studies department. Look at the pictures. It's like putting Hitler in charge of a museum of Jewish antiquities. Why are we listening to these man-haters about how men and women should interact? It's mad! Anyway, it's not coming from nowhere. They are lesbians.
So my point is, you seem to paint these small groups with these broad brushes and really pick out their weaknesses and beat them on the head with them.
Do you know a lesbian with a sense of humor? Because I don't.
I do. So, I just feel yourself that maybe you should, not saying you have to, but you thought that you would have more of a sense of empathy or actually address
I don't care about
challenges.
feelings.
Okay.
I don't care about their feelings. What I'm trying to understand is why you think I'm dangerous. What I'm saying to you is fuck your feelings. I'm
fine with that.
Feelings. What I want to see is evidence. I want to see evidence that there's a systemic problem in society where the progressives claim there is one, and I don't think there is. For instance, rape shopping that journalists have to do now, right? To try to prove that there is a rape culture endemic in campuses. I hope you don't believe that there is. It does not bear the slightest scrutiny. It does not stand up to the most cursory common sense test. But progressive journalists will set aside facts and go rape shopping. Put Sabrina Irving at Rolling Stone, for instance. And of course that attracts liars and attention seekers. Every single one of these that has been reported in the progressive media, celebrated, as a sort of example of toxic masculinity, has turned out to be a lie. Duke Lacrosse was a lie. UVA was a lie. Columbia was a lie. All this stuff is lies. So I'm thinking, well, what's the evidence? Well, you look at the Department of Justice statistics, the gold standard, and it says that quite far from 1 in 4, or 1 in 5, or even 1 in 3, which I saw the other day. By next week it's going to be like 22 in 3 women have been raped. It's more like 1 in 52. Now that is not good, but it is universes away from the statistic that feminists like to claim. The wage gap doesn't stand up to scrutiny. Now, is it hateful to question whether whether men and women are being told lies about what they respectively get paid? No, I don't think it is. When I talk about the what I think is a poisonous influence of lesbian-dominated gender studies departments on the way that men and women communicate with one another, I think these people are deserving of ridicule because they are awful. They are peddling lies to young girls, telling young girls that their problems are the fault of the patriarchy, this mystical conspiracy theory. These people are trafficking in evidence-free lies, lying to children. The least I could do is take the piss out of them for being humorless and bad.
So I can appreciate that you're skeptical and that you like to dig into numbers. It's the way that I think we all should be, and not just accept something on face value. But the way that you talk about these subjects with such authority and without providing your audience with the evidence, with the numbers, with the sources, is going to convince. You talked about it and provided that a fact, or what you're saying is a fact, but it would be great if somewhere on your internet videos, somewhere you were able to put some sort of evidence that other people can dig into themselves.
Well, that's good. And unfortunately, it admits that you are not familiar with my material. Of course, if you did read my columns, you would see that they are among the most heavily footnoted in journalism today, riddled with links to studies to the point it's almost boring. What I was objecting to, really, was the idea that speech can be dangerous. Now, if I were an imam, would you be in this room, coming up here, and saying to me, your speech is dangerous? No, you wouldn't fucking dare even show up. You wouldn't be here. If I were, a white supremacist, you might have a point. What about anything that I've said is dangerous? What, in your view, and I'm not coming to you because I'm interested in this, because I always try to understand the liberal mind as a mystery. That all of our great scientists, sociologists in history have been unable to crack. We can send people up into the stars. We can plumb the depths of the ocean. We can unlock the mysteries of the atom. But why people believe shit like this is a mystery. So,
let me answer. I left one question.
Tell me what you think is dangerous about anything I said today.
So, you just threw out your own statistic, which I'm going to have to look up myself and check out and take evidence for myself about the rape culture.
Okay, exchange numbers is going to be great.
Yep.
Have a long, happy
Of course. But you throw it out there and you say the way you approach it is. I know. I don't know where to
I've been like this all night. I started here. Come.
Okay.
Come and sit next to me like we like each other. Not that fucking close. Alright, let's go there. There we go.
You approached it and you said that it's still not good. I would say that statistic, if it is true, is at the 1 in 53 rapes on college campus that you threw out there.
Yeah.
You said the way you approached it was it's not good. I would say that's still abhorrent. And the way that you take even the statistics that you're saying is
American
less.
college campuses are among the safest places for women to be. And people who peddle the lies are like 1 in 3, 1 in 4, want to tell women they're the most dangerous places you can be. It's a lie. In what possible universe is that responsible or caring behavior? That's not the behavior of somebody with integrity. That's the behavior of somebody with a political agenda who cares nothing for the facts.
I'm not saying that you can't criticize what they're using for statistics and you can't look at his evidence for yourself and spread, what you find. But I think the way that you paint these things as non-issues might be blown up by what you describe as the regressive left and be, really, really huge, and you're saying not as big of issues. I say in the middle, they're still huge issues. And the way that you brush them off and then get an entire audience to buy in completely to these big issues being complete non-issues is dangerous.
I understand your point. It's certainly not any definition of dangerous, I understand. But I think he's done a very good job, so we should give him a Oh no, we're okay. Let's not blow the ball up. No, I mean, look, the point. What I try to.
one more important question for you.
All right, go ahead.
I'm very, very curious.
Hi.
Please correct me if I'm misquoting you, but you said that aggression is one of the things that is most sexually attractive to women about men.
Well, it can be, yes.
Okay, just wondering out of curiosity, have you ever actually sexually pleased a woman?
Yes, I have. At the grand old age of 31, I think the tally is about 12, possibly 13. 12, 13 more years. Was that a special question?
I expected more.
How many women have you pleased, madam? For fuck's sake. Right. Yes, I've fucked lots of plunge. Right. All right. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to be here. I'm going to say hi.